If you've got that tape running in your head of your
mother being angry
at you, right? Every relationship you are in, every action you do is colored by that tape. Your child work, all of it was pointing to deep, deep stuff that I eventually figured out was it's known as CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's regular PTSD, which is something.
So far, we talked about Raffaele's early life, and then we got into our mystery school experience. Now we're going to talk about sort of more of Raffaele's business and Raffaele as a business person and neurofeedback and Neuroptimal and his journey into why he's so passionate about doing work in the community, and also not just work, but he's invested in a business that's already helping people with anxiety and depression. And I did a test of Neuroptimal, which we're going to talk about. So this is I guess a good point in time where I can ask Raffaele about what made you so passionate about this technology, neurofeedback, and the lamp that you started work with. If you want to talk about all of this, would be great. But yeah, is there anything that triggered you into wanting to go into this as a business, as a training for other people?
Mm-hmm. So I have COVID actually to thank for this, believe it or not. I really started to dig into my traumas, like really deeply. In the third year of Reese Thomas is when you really start doing some deep excavation.
Yes. Yeah.
And as I started to learn that there were even traumas that I wasn't even aware of, that were starting to come out and that needed to get addressed, that I was blocking. I was totally blocking myself. I was not ready to go there. And there were just these regular loop kind of patterns I knew that were going on in my mind that even with all the mystery school, all of that they were still running, that I could still feel myself snapping back to these kind of
these
regular
programs?
behavior. Yeah, these regular behavior patterns, regular reactions. I was becoming more present. I knew they were happening, but there were still times where I felt sometimes powerless to do anything about them, that they were just running on their own. Okay? And so that's really frustrating when you say, I've become present enough to know that something's happening, but now the tools that I have are not enough to push me past where I am. Okay? So I just started doing a lot of work around.
So just for our let me pause you there a little bit, because what you're saying, for our audience, you got to a point where you had built enough self-awareness to know something is not working in your life.
Right.
And you were looking to kind of get past that in a way that you don't have to keep coming back to that cycle of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right?
There was a recognition that there's something operating under the surface that needed to be addressed, and I was determined to find out what that was. Okay. So I started, the Byron Katie stuff, the work, the path work, Ava Parakos, the shadow work, inner child work. All of it was pointing to deep, deep stuff that I eventually figured out was it's known as CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And so there's regular PTSD, which is, something terrible happens, the military people, a woman is sexually assaulted or someone's robbed. That causes PTSD, where your frameworks are broken down because of some terrible situation, okay? CPTSD is an incremental, when your brain is forming, when you're a child, incremental trauma that causes your brain to form in a certain way. There's a lot of work around it by Gabor Mate and polyvagal theory with Professor Borges. There's a lot of somatic work that tries to get to where we store these traumas in our body.
So are these complex PTSD, is it kind of even pre-birth?
Yes, actually prenatal. It can be because you're absorbing everything that's going on in your mother's environment, whether it's food,
so if she's
drugs,
anxious,
stress, yes, all of that. So the neural connections begin getting wired immediately. Like once the brain's formed, you start forming neural connections. So
even before birth.
Yeah, so the brain is a map to help you survive in your environment. Okay?
The brain is a map to help you survive in your environment. Quote Raffaele on that.
The map is written based on the terrain. If you want to make a map, you look around and you start writing things down. There's a tree. Oh, there's a building there. There's a street. And you make the map based on what you see. Right? If you're a child and you see danger everywhere, what's your map going to look like?
It's going to be full of danger. It's going to be a landmine.
Yeah.
It's going to be a map of a landmine.
Yeah. So that is how your brain keeps you alive, how it protects you. That's its job. Your brain's job is keeping you alive, protecting you. That's it. That's your brain's entire function.
That's how the brain evolved during our evolution. Was we weren't physically capable to defend against a woolly mammoth, so we became clever. Right.
I mean, they actually figured out. I was reading this the other day in a book called "Trickster Makes the Universe" and how the trickster archetype has caused everything to come into being. And they actually learned that if you ran mammoths into the sun, you could get them to run off a cliff and die because they couldn't see the edge of the cliff because they were running towards the sun. And then they would go down to the bottom and eat the dead because they couldn't kill a big woolly mammoth because they didn't have the tools. But they learned if they ran at it and chased it into the sun off a cliff, it would run off the cliff not knowing it was running off a cliff and die, and then they'd have a meal for the whole tribe. So that's how early the association started happening. Even pre-verbal.
Wow.
That's an
amazing story.
Yeah.
And what was the book that?
Trickster Makes This World.
Trickster Makes This World. Okay, I need to definitely read this book.
Lewis Hyde is the author.
Okay. All right. Great. Yeah. So again, that's a great story. So
back
your
to
brain.
COVID.
Yes.
I'll tell you.
So brain, you said, and this is very important. Brain is for survival. It was an organ made for survival.
Absolutely. It is all your survival impulses. Your brain's job is to get genes into the next generation. Period. Survival of the species. Mating. Food. Survival. Those are the three things. Don't die. And that's what we look, even now, right? When you meet somebody new, what's going on in our brainstem is this thing going to kill me?
Friendly or
can I sleep with it? What am I going to get from associating with it? Those are the three things. And that's why Reese has those rules.
That makes sense.
So anyway, I was looking for a way to address these traumas, and I started reading a lot of books on neurofeedback because there's a lot of work where they work with PTSD and complex PTSD people using neurofeedback. Neurofeedback is a method of showing the brain what's going on inside the dark cave, because normally the brain is never made aware of what it's doing. Okay, it's just running its programs. Okay, whatever's in there, it's just running, and it doesn't know what it's doing. It's just doing it all the time. So what I learned was that neurofeedback was a way of presenting the brain with its activity, allowing the brain to see what it's doing and to make changes, because the brain has the ability to change itself. We're changing our own brains all day long based on external factors, but never on internal feedback as to what the brain is actually doing itself. So I wanted to go get neurofeedback. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get neurofeedback, right? Well, guess what? In the middle of COVID, nobody was doing neurofeedback in like sitting in an office, putting sensors on people because it was COVID. So there was no way to do it. So I was like, all right, well, maybe I can buy a system. So now I'm like, I'm going to buy a neurofeedback system. So the neurofeedback systems that they use in offices cost $20,000. All All right.
Wow. So they're not cheap.
They're not cheap. So then I found a company where you could buy a kit and make one, and I didn't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stumbled across an ad for in-home neurofeedback, where you can rent a neurofeedback system from a trainer, okay, and do your own brain training, do your own neurofeedback. And I said, and actually it was in Melrose. I rented my first neurofeedback system from an operator in Melrose.
Nice.
Right?
So it's right next town.
Yeah. And I did it for a month. I rented the system for a month and I did neurofeedback on myself. And just shifts were starting to happen. Like, I just felt lighter. I was noticing that I was quicker. Like, I would drop something and boom, I'd like be able to catch it. Like,
and that was kind of not possible before.
It was just, I felt like it was just a better version of me. Like, all of the good stuff that I had was amplified, and the crappy stuff was kind of starting to become smaller and a little bit more distant. I was getting a perspective that I didn't have before, that I was actually able to watch myself for the first time ever. And they call it meditation on steroids.
Yeah, okay.
When you do the neurofeedback, it's basically, if you do a 33-minute neurofeedback session on the system that we're talking about, the Neuroptimal, it's like basically sitting for a week in Zazen. And you know that, right? From your experience.
Yeah, so one of the things that that I felt when I was using the Neuroptimal system is that my focus, kind of like there's just the ability to lock onto something, and I have not been poor at that, but I think it went to another level where I can stay locked in. Like, I'm right now locked into that object that I'm looking at, and I can stay locked in for another 20-30 minutes if I really wanted to. That's been the shift. Like, I didn't really have depression or anxiety when I started using this tool. So I didn't know what was going to be, what was this tool going to do for me? Because I was like, I'm trying it out. Raffaele's my good friend, so I was trusting his words on, dude, this is another level. And I really think that it has improved my focus. And I'm sitting here kind of blown away by how little can give you. It's not, if you look at the grand scheme of things, this tool can be very transformational for some people, and I've talked to some people, even in our cohort, there's some people that have done this program, and their kids have done this program, and they're jumping up and down about this product. So I'll let Raffaele talk a little bit about Neuroptimal and how its neurofeedback evolved into this new kind of Neuroptimal. I think takes neurofeedback to another level, right?
So the nice thing about Neuroptimal is it meets you where you are. It meets the brain where it is. So if you're a person that already has a good, stable kind of emotional, mental life, okay, you're not going to use it for fixing some sort of trauma, or that's not applicable to you. You want to get to your next level, your next best. There's a lot of professional athletes that use neurofeedback to get into and stay in the zone, okay?
That just blew my mind.
All
like
right.
Professional
pitchers, golfers, basketball players, anybody that needs to focus under pressure and deliver consistently. Tennis pros, they're all doing neurofeedback.
It's happening right now.
Yeah, Tony Robbins does neurofeedback all the time.
I didn't know
Him
that.
and his whole family do neurofeedback all the time.
Wow.
Because it is literally showing you what's going on in your brain. Look at the popularity of heart math now, heart rate variability.
Yeah.
What is that doing? It's showing you what your heart's doing,
Yeah.
and it's allowing you to work with what your heart is doing to improve your emotional intelligence and heart openness, okay? Neurofeedback is biofeedback for your brain, all right? I had a client tell me that the first time they did a Neuroptimal session, that they literally had a memory of their childhood that they never knew happened. That they thought they had a perfect, idyllic childhood, and they had a memory of a situation with their mother where they became very angry. What it was a repressed memory.
And so
it just popped out.
And so just taking a step back, in your experience, what happens when a lot of these repressed things stay repressed versus, I mean, some people watching the show may be like, oh, do I want that coming to the surface, right? Because that could be some people's first reaction.
Right.
But there is a science to that, right? So can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, they're coming to the surface nonetheless. They're always manifesting. It's just a matter, is it consciously manifesting, okay?
So
you just don't know it's running.
So I'm just trying to simplify this. So if you had a negative experience that hasn't been, that you're not aware of, or you've shoved it down because of trauma or whatever, under the surface, it can still run your life, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. Carl Jung said, until we make the subconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Until you make the subconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
And a lot of people we know blame fate for all of that's happening to their lives, but ultimately
they're creating it.
You're
creating their
creating
own fate.
You're creating
it's
your fate.
Fate versus destiny.
Yes.
Fate is what happens to you. Destiny is what you create.
And that creation is a possibility. As a human beings, we're here to create our own experience. But a lot of times we don't know that, we don't understand that, and we don't explore the depths of our consciousness. And unfortunately, we end up living like a victim all our lives.
It's like trying to fly an airplane in the clouds without instruments. Okay?
That's going to be a problem.
Right? Right? You're going to crash.
Yes.
Most likely you're going to crash.
Uh-huh.
You need the input. You need to know what's around you, what's going on. You need to see the map. Most people don't know what their map is. Neurofeedback shows you your map.
Wow.
All right?
That's powerful.
Now, when I said that about, bringing up a memory or whatever, it doesn't re-trigger traumatic experiences. You're not going to, if something horrible happened to you, it's not like you're going to have this flashback of, this horrible thing that happened to you in your childhood, okay? It's not designed to re-trigger you. It's designed to help the brain see what's going on, present it to the brain via the feedback, which is auditory in nature. There's headphones you put in, okay? So you put the headphones in, you put the sensors on your scalp, your ears, okay? And then it connects to the computer. The computer just runs all this data of what it's picking up on the sensors, and it creates a map of your brain. It shows you your EEG. You saw those bars moving, right? So it shows all of the brainwave frequencies, which each one of those bands of frequencies have a meaning, okay?
Yeah, so that's very interesting. One of the questions, I guess I made a mistake in the video that I made of the first session of my Neuroptimal. I was calling the sensors electrodes.
Right.
Was I wrong?
Yeah, so they're not electrodes because there's no power coming out of them. They're only sensors like a microphone. It's like a microphone for picking up your brainwaves. Your brainwaves.
Okay, so I was wrong. I kept calling them electrodes, and I realized after I was reading the paperwork, they are not electrodes, they're sensors.
Yeah, and they're super sensitive because the potential, the voltage coming off your scalp is like milli and microvolts, like tiny, tiny amounts of electricity, which is why you need to find a spot, like a specific spot where there's a little dent in, that's all in the videos. So it's just reading that brainwave activity 256 times a second, 256 times a second, and it is feeding it back, your entire brain's activity constantly through the headphones and through the screen display that you're watching.
Wow. So at times the headphones cut out for a little bit.
A crackle.
Like
a skipped record.
Yeah. So what's happening when the headset when the music is crackling?
Okay, so that actually is a auditory indication that your brain is shifting. There's a pattern that it's moving from one state to another, because every minute of every day our brain is shifting from one pattern to another. If you put an EEG on somebody, you literally can see their thoughts. You can see what their thoughts look like on the EEG. And sometimes those thoughts are fluffy bunnies. Sometimes they're
not so fluffy.
Sometimes they're getting hit with a stick. But if the brain is just operating in this kind of autopilot mode, so let's use a computer as an example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've got your Mac sitting over there, right? If your Mac picked up a virus, okay, and you don't have software on it to detect it, right? Does the computer know it has a virus?
It doesn't.
It's just going to run
It's
whatever
just gonna run the program.
It just runs whatever the virus tells it to do, right?
That's a great analogy.
That's what is going on in your brain. Your brain has all these viruses in it. It's like you say you open your browser on your computer, okay? So you open Google Chrome or
Microsoft Edge or
Safari,
whatever,
right? And now you open 100 tabs on that browser. 100 tabs. You just keep opening new tabs, right? What's going to happen to your computer?
It's going to slow down. It's going to bog down.
And it's going to heat up.
Yeah, it's going to have all kinds of memory problems.
Right?
It's going to have memory problems.
Right. That's what's happening in our brains. You got a tab for when you were a kid. You got a tab for your ex-wife. You got a tab for the boss at work that gives you a hard time.
That you never closed.
That are never closed. You got all these tabs running all day long, 24/7, even while you're sleeping. The tabs never get closed because you don't know they're open. Neuroptimal shows you the tabs that you have open and allows you to close them. It allows the brain to say, do I want this tab open? Do I need this tab open? Maybe I should close this tab.
Yeah.
Maybe I should delete this and never go back to it ever again.
Wow.
But the brain can't make that decision to improve itself if it doesn't know it's doing it.
So, and the way Neuroptimal is telling the brain is how is
Through the feedback. Because your brain, every time it hears that crackle, it creates what's known as an Orient Response, okay? So let me explain the Orient Response. You're hiking in the woods, okay? And all of a sudden you hear a stick break behind you. You're all alone in the woods, it's getting dark, and you hear a stick breaking behind you. What do?
You look.
You freeze,
you freeze, yeah.
and you look, right? What's going on? That's the Orient Response. So your brain is trained to look for anomalies, to look for differences. When you get that feedback in your ear, your brain gets oriented and goes, what just happened? And your brain is smart enough to figure out through repeated training that crackle happened because I just ran a pattern. And with repeated training, your brain goes, crackle, pattern, crackle, pattern. Do I want that pattern that's creating the crackle? And it gives it the choice of beneficial pattern, benign pattern, negative pattern. Get rid of the negative, maybe keep the benign, definitely run the beneficial. It's feedback.
And there's algorithm that's determining all of this in the back.
It's a proprietary, very powerful algorithm that really does an amazing job. The shifts that clients that use this system have are just amazing. I've had people that are, at our level or above, spiritually, they have out-of-body experiences, they travel, they get downloads, they contact, and I don't want to get too airy-fairy with it because this is not it's
accessible to everyone.
It meets you where you're at.
Right,
okay?
And that's important.
If you're in survival mode, it's going to help you survive better. And then it's going to take you to the next level where you're surviving, but surviving at a little bit more calm level.
And when you're saying surviving, just so people that are watching, anxiety, depression, what else does it, ADD?
So it's done wonders. I've had ADD my whole life, okay? I was actually able to complete finally the coursework to get my college degree after, 35 years that I just dropped out of college because I couldn't do the work. I didn't like it. I was able to focus. I was able to have a full-time job, a part-time job, and do all the coursework necessary
for that
and running a household. Like I had all these balls in the air, and it was like I was doing it. I could never have done that without the brain training. I know I couldn't have.
Wow.
I know I couldn't have. So neurofeedback is now a level 1 intervention for ADD. Equal
that's
to
amazing.
Drugs. Equal to
that's
drugs.
That's amazing. And this just started now, or
they just recognized it, I think, this year, and the science is proving it. It's good for ADD. It's good for PTSD. Now, Neuroptimal is not a medical product. It's a wellness device. We're not curing anything. Okay.
Not diagnosing anything.
We're not diagnosing anything. It's just it's meeting the brain where it is and allowing the brain to make the changes to get to the better you that's possible.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise on that.
My pleasure.
So I have one last question, and we're going to wrap up this session. But there's a lot of concern about privacy, right?
Mhm.
How is the Neuroptimal, since it being able to record your brain waves and all that, like is there any privacy protection built into this, or?
So you can delete your session the minute that you finish it. You can save them if you want, but you can delete your session as soon as you're done with it, and once it's deleted, it's gone.
And
Nothing
there's
stored
nothing
on any
transferred to
server.
the cloud
No,
or any of that,
no.
right? So nothing's going into.
They do get some.
This is ridiculous. Okay. All right. So we got to do that little section again. So I'm going to start again from data privacy. So I have one last question before we wrap up today. There's a lot of talk about data privacy and all that, and since we are, these sensors are reading our brain waves, how is the data protected by Neuroptimal?
So first of all, you can run the sessions completely anonymously. So
Okay.
you don't put your name on it. It doesn't know who you are. The system is just performing a function for you.
Okay.
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 There is statistical generic data about the performance of the program, which is monitored to improve the algorithm.
And it's
but
aggregated?
there's never any association to any specific individual or any,
Okay.
But you can choose to not have that happen, and you can delete the session immediately after you do it, in which case it's gone.
And that's something you can discuss with the person doing the
As the trainer, I will show you how to delete sessions and how to set your privacy settings. So,
Okay, yeah, so there's inbuilt privacy. Hey, I think we've had a great conversation today. I would like to talk for longer, but for the sake of our audience, I think we're gonna need to wrap up at this point. And yeah, what a pleasure this has been bringing you on the set
also.
and picking your brain and learning about your life, Neuroptimal, and seeing you reformed and ready to do great things for the community. I think we need people like Raffaele in our communities
We need
to
people like you too.
we need people that are doing things for others and doing things for themselves, because if we stop growing and sometimes when we get into activism and doing community work, it can be very outwards directed and not so much for you and for your growth. But I think this path that you're on, it serves both inwards and outwards, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Raffaele, for coming to the show.
Love you, brother.
And